Fiber has a complicated link to inflammatory bowel disease, and information on how fiber can affect the condition is often conflicting. Hi, I'm Danielle, and I'm a virtual registered dietitian nutritionist, and this video is for you if you have Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis and have been feeling confused on how much fiber is recommended for you to eat daily. A few of the reasons why fiber recommendations can be so confusing for IBD is because they're based on disease activity, meaning that fiber recommendations are different during a flare versus when a person is in remission, and are different for secondary disease complications experience, like the amount of fiber recommended is different for strictures versus hemorrhoids. So let's first talk about low fiber. The most common reason why patients with Crohn's or UC are told to avoid eating foods high in fiber is based on the idea that a low residue diet can be useful for short-term control of gastrointestinal symptoms and to reduce the amount of stool output. Technically, the definition of a low fiber diet consists of about 10 to 12 grams of fiber per day, but may be lower depending on the situation. For example, with severe strictures, recommendations may be lower for fiber. Now, with nutrition, lots of numbers can get really confusing. So what do those numbers of 10 to 12 grams of fiber per day really mean? I want you to think about it in comparison to the daily normal fiber recommendations for adults 50 or younger. For women, that recommendation is 25 grams of fiber per day, while for men, it's 38 grams of fiber per day. So in comparison, right, we're just thinking in comparison, a low fiber diet is less than half of the normal fiber recommendation per day. Now that being said, which foods have fiber? Short answer, plant foods contain fiber. So think like fruits and veggies and grains, many healthful and very anti-inflammatory foods. So by knowing that information of which foods actually contain fiber, say you were flaring and you were temporarily following a low fiber diet, you could be mindful of which plant foods you're choosing and perhaps the portion size you choose to consume. Ideally, still aiming to incorporate as many anti-inflammatory fruits and veggies and foods in your eating plan as possible. Now, why does the type of plant food chosen make a difference? It's because different fruits and veggies contain different amounts of fiber per serving. Some produce contain naturally lower amounts of fiber, such as melons and stone fruits, carrots, and potatoes. And related to portion size, don't overlook the fact that a half a cup of fruit will contain half as much fiber as 1 cup of that same fruit. Now, there are additional ways in which we can still get the nutrients from anti-inflammatory foods with fiber, but make the foods easier to tolerate. For example, some common tips and tricks are peeling, cooking, or even juicing fruits and veggies. The reason for peeling is that the skins of many fruits and veggies like apples, pears, carrots, and more contain the type of fiber that's harder to digest. It's mostly what we call insoluble fiber, which we'll talk about more shortly in this video. But peeling those skins could be an easy way to reduce some of that hard to digest fiber. Cooking also softens fiber inside of foods. When you cook plants, the heat softens the fiber inside of them. The longer you cook the food, the more of that fiber is broken down and the softer the food becomes. Finally, juicing can lower fiber by removing the pulp or fibrous bits of the plant and leaving behind the juice. But please note that with fruit juices, you want to be careful that the juice is not too high in sugar. When it's concentrated like that, in juice form, a lot of sugar all at once, even natural sugar, that may cause diarrhea. So for example, say you're going to make your own juice at home, I'd recommend going for a juice that has a mixture of fruits and veggies to lower that sugar content. Something that I want to bring up at this point is that I get a lot of questions about smoothies. So there are 2 things to keep in mind here. 1, when you blend up fruits and veggies, you're not lowering the fiber content. So if your goal is to get the nutrients from produce but not have as much fiber, you'll want to juice it. However, 2, Some people are able to tolerate the really blenderized produce better than the whole fruit or produce alone. The texture is what makes the difference there. For example, think of eating peanuts versus smooth peanut butter. Many people with IBD do better with the smooth nut butter than the nut itself because digestion begins in the mouth when we chew mechanically. And if we don't chew well enough, the gut has to work harder later down the line, and that could potentially cause more pain or digestion issues. But let's switch gears here to something critical for people with Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis to know. You may not always need a low-fiber diet. So let me just repeat that one more time. You may not always need a low-fiber diet. And very often, people with IBD are not advised to reintroduce fiber after they're feeling better after a flare, which can result in prolonged unnecessary fiber restriction. This is really unfortunate because several nutritional research studies have found that lower fiber intake is associated with a risk of flare-ups in people with Crohn's disease and UC. For example, in one study, researchers were examining fiber intake in people with IBD and having flare-ups 6 months later. People who ate more fiber were associated with having 40% lower odds of disease flare-up at 6 months compared to those who did not. So that's a really big deal, right? So regardless of the reason you're thinking about increasing fiber, whether you're motivated to add some fiber to potentially decrease the risk of flare-ups, or you struggle with constipation now that you're perhaps not flaring anymore, or you have hemorrhoids, or maybe you simply want to include more anti-inflammatory foods to lower inflammation, many of which naturally contain fiber, let's talk about some tips to help you reintroduce fiber. First tip, go slow. The first thing really about fiber is I'm definitely not recommending that you go from 0 to 100 right away. For anyone who wants to increase fiber intake, I strongly recommend you go slow. Because for anyone, IBD or not, who increases fiber too quickly, you're not gonna feel very good. Like bloating, gas, constipation, or pain can be felt. So the idea is to go super slow, like even just adding a few more grams each week to see how you do. Second tip, drink more fluids. Extra fluid must be consumed, or else fiber will just make you more constipated. So when you increase fiber, you always want to increase your fluids as well. And third tip, the type of fiber. Did you know that there are 2 different types of fiber, soluble and insoluble, and one type may be better tolerated by people with IBD? We're going to talk about the different types. So let's first talk about soluble fiber. Soluble fiber has a bunch of health benefits, like helping lower cholesterol and stabilizing blood sugar, but perhaps what we care about most for people with IBD is that it's usually tolerated better because it draws water into the gut to help soften stool. And that's a good thing because we want stool to be soft and easy to pass. Another bonus, soluble fiber can help prevent colon cancer, which is important because there is an increased risk in certain types of colon cancer with IBD. So what foods contain soluble fiber? Some food sources naturally higher in this type of fiber include apples, citrus fruits, carrots, oats, oat bran, ground flaxseed, and asparagus. So we talked about soluble fiber, but what's the deal with insoluble fiber? Aside from its other benefits like helping cholesterol and promoting feeling full, the role of insoluble fiber in the digestive system is to add bulk to stool, which can help prevent constipation by helping the body eliminate the stool more easily. This type of fiber can be thought of as roughage, and it's been linked to helping protect against colon cancer too. So what does this really mean for people with IBD? Because insoluble fiber adds bulk to stool and acts as roughage, I'd recommend trying out foods with this kind of fiber after exploring how you do with the soluble fiber foods. So which foods contain insoluble fiber? Whole wheat products, wheat and corn bran, brown rice, nuts and seeds, many veggies including cauliflower, green beans, potatoes, and skins of root veggies of potatoes, like potatoes. Side note is that foods don't contain just one type or another of fiber naturally. It's normal for foods to contain a mixture of both soluble and insoluble fiber. But the reason why we could separate foods out like that and put them into different categories of fiber is because different foods contain different compositions or percentages of one type of fiber versus another. So some foods have way more soluble fiber than insoluble fiber, and vice versa. Did you find this video helpful? If so, please let us know by liking it and subscribing to this YouTube channel. Thanks.